Hi everyone, my name is Evgeny Labunsky and I'm the management partner of Scrum Ukraine, and today I have Wolfgang Richter with me. He is the Chief Executive Officer of JIPP.IT and actually the certified Large-Scale Scrum trainer. And he just finished the LeSS class in Kiev. What is your feeling about this, Wolfgang?
Oh, it was again a great experience for me, of course. I like the city, of course. I like the country. I'd like to come back here over and over again. And this class, once again, was really interesting with a lot of questions, a lot of skepticism, of course. I mean, people are not always open for every idea, but really this kind of challenging people, that's what I really like.
What was the most challenging idea you gave them so they're so
Yeah, well, sometimes, you know, people say they are working with Scrum and less kind of approach for a very long time, but if you really go into details a little bit more, like are they real feature teams, are you really only one product owner, stuff like that. Sometimes the basics, it's, that's what I need to challenge them. One of the questions I asked them actually was, or one of the comments I got, we cannot cooperate in that because we are different companies, you know. And one of the provocative, more challenging question I got, why not? What does block you or hinder you from doing that? You're different companies, so what? Break down these walls between your companies in whatever fashion, and you know, people start thinking, but they don't know yet how to do it. But that's really interesting in these classes.
You know, this like very popular in Ukraine. We are pretty outsourcing country, you know, so we outsource a lot, and that's always the question: the walls between the actual customers over in Europe and in US, and the local guys who's working there. They be, you know, hiding everything behind and afraid of like disturbing customers with the nice questions.
I mean, it's obvious there are walls between organizations, but they can be semi-transparent. That means you can see through them at least. That would be one step further.
Great. So, you know, like there are right now kind of a zoo of the frameworks. So, and like for the last 5 years, that's 5 frameworks, right? So it's LeSS, Safe, Scrum at Scale, Nexus, and Scale at something. So don't remember, right?
Enterprise Scrum,
Enterprise Scrum,
etc. Yes.
Yeah, and
there are many ideas.
So many ideas. So why LeSS?
That's going back to the origins of, or the first contact I had with something that is called nowadays Agile. I mean, I started getting interested in these kind of methods in 1998. My first contact was with extreme programming, and in 1999 it was Scrum. The first time I stumbled over Scrum somehow. The reason why I always was interested in doing something differently, changing the way of working, was I was not really satisfied how we did it, you know. And sometimes I can be a lazy person. That means I look for the most efficient way of doing something, you know, saving time, saving my energy. That's really a motivation for me. That means also I want to simplify things. I like this one sentence Albert Einstein once said: do things as simple as possible, but not simpler. And that's one of my motivations. So I like to have simpler approaches. I like to enjoy what I'm doing, and I like to learn continuously. So constantly adding some knowledge to mine. So getting better, continuous improvement. And when I realized Scrum is something that promises such an approach, or my motivation, it fits to it, then I thought, after years doing Scrum and working with this Agile mindset, for scaling for larger enterprises, what comes next, right? What is a former approach that could fit into it? I mean, I was applying these practices and principles of LeSS long before it was formalized, so just intuitively. More. But when then 2008, 2009, LeSS came as a formal framework out, I thought that's the next logical step for me, you know. I also analyzed others, I did research about others, but this was the next logical step for me, because I wanted to stick with Scrum and doing something that's really promising to become Agile.
Did you try something else?
Well, I wrote a PhD thesis, you know, about Agile approaches, organizational structures and so forth, and I did analysis of various others approaches. I like, for example, Enterprise Scrum is pretty close to it, yes. I always took a deeper look into Nexus, for example, which is also not so far off of LeSS. I mean, they are all really promising. Not as promising as LeSS to me, but they make sense, yeah. So I've also analyzed others, which I don't want to name now. So.
But you know, I like, for my own experience, I made different certifications outside of LeSS because like that's all experiments. You remember on our Agile Rock conference, we had a hosted discussion, the panel discussion, and Henrik Niebeck told it. Everything is like experiments, everything is the tools. You can collect them, configure in the way you would like to configure, right? And actually in the other frameworks, there are some of the great tools, as I found, very reasonable even for the enterprise. Like in the frameworks we don't want to name, there is the PI planning, right? So there is like the good ideas to people come up at least sometimes
absolutely
and discuss, right? So that's sometimes might break in for the companies. Why we should come again all tomorrow, couple of days. So that's a lot of money, but that really makes sense, right?
This is a chance and a risk, I would say, because of course not every idea is bad. If you don't consider a framework as the next best step for somebody, that doesn't mean everything inside of it is really wrong or bad or something. That means there are very good ideas inside of it. We can take also from this and that and the other framework, do some cherry picking, you know, taking practices and principles and adding them, for example, to a LeSS environment. Why not? That can totally make sense, but the risk with that is that you pick the wrong cherries and it's incompatible with what is the underlying idea of, for example, LeSS. Yes.
As far as I know, in LeSS there are experiments, right? That's a special section how you can experiment with the default approach. What was your biggest experiment?
My biggest experiment, that's an interesting question. Actually, I'm not sure if I can tell you what my biggest experiment was. I mean, personally, I can tell you the biggest experiment was to go with Agile at all. I mean, when I really started with that in, like said, in the beginning of 2000, I had no clue where it leads to, right? So it was really something which was completely open to me, whether it makes sense, you know, and invested time and energy and also money from myself, you know. Whether there's any return for that, I had no clue where this road really will lead me. And this, I think this was my personal biggest experiment.
You know, the transformations, like we usually start in the companies, they're starting with a lot of challenges. And this is not so easy to start the transformation in LeSS, because when you open this page, when how to start transformation in LeSS, they have it on the website, right? So you can click there. There are a couple of steps, right? And they look amazing. So first step is you have to teach everyone, right? You have to define the product, right? You have to define team. You have to define done, right? And like start with education is not so big problem, right? So you can just launch the educational process, or is it?
But that's after somebody made the decision that we will go towards LeSS. So there are prerequisites. LeSS is saying if you're doing transitions, it has to be bottom up and top down at the same time. That means you need the executive commitment for that at first. It's sometimes very different where it starts from. I mean, sometimes it's triggered really by development itself, sometimes it's triggered by middle management, sometimes it's triggered by executives, but you need to find a balance throughout the organization and people who will want to go this way, right? These are prerequisites. It's also very important for me if I do a transition to know where we will start, because we're going from A to B, but where is A? Where are we at the current moment in time? Because if something is going wrong, what do we want to achieve after that? If we want to interrupt a transition, I hope nobody does that, because that means you're starting a second transition in parallel. Now, and also you need to figure out what is the goal, what are the benefits you expect from the transition. Just doing Agile or just doing just being Agile or doing LeSS or something because everybody else does it makes absolutely no sense. You need to be aware of what is your goal, what is your measurable goal, What kind of benefit do you want to get out of that?
You know, I find out a very interesting thing when we're starting about thinking about why the people usually start the agile transformation. Let's name them in general agile transformations. So they usually started from the next 10 points, like time to market, better collaboration with customer, like pretty not really what is the goal here, right? So it doesn't sound like what should be done.
It could be a goal to have a shorter time to market. Of course, why not? This is measurable, but this is an effect of something. That means, first of all, you need to figure out where are pain points in your organization. What is causing a delay in time to market currently? And you also need to do a risk analysis of if you change that current situation, what could happen? Yeah, what could be positive and negative consequences? And do you have the time and the energy to invest in this change? Because it's nothing that happens on the weekends or at nighttime automatically. There is somebody needed for that, and people need to invest their time and energy into it. And if that all comes together, if that all fits together, then it makes sense to start it. And then we can talk about educating people, etc. Yes.
You know, you also told that the less transformation should go top down and bottom up, right? So there will be someone in the middle who's be like, right? And that's usually the middle managers, right? Because from the top, they see the value, right? They know most of the time what they would like to do with these tools, right? And then the bottom, people is like, if the organization is really, really slow, the people is very engaged to something new. They would like to change. They are open-minded. They would like to do whatever you gave them. So they're like hungry for the new experiments, right? But the middle management is.
I mean, of course, there are Lamens laws which say that organizations are optimized for status quo situations, especially for middle management. I don't want to blame all middle managers because very often the trigger is coming from middle management and it then flows to the top and the bottom. Even especially this analogy top down and bottom up is not really nice actually, because if you consider being CEOs, executives, more servants to the organization, not so much the typical management type, then we could see us as equal to a certain extent for certain topics, right? And that's exactly what needs to happen in transition. We need to work on that together. Of course, executives or middle managers need to make decisions for the reorganization, restructuring. Changing habits should be done by the people themselves, so you can't make a decision to change somebody. We can only say, okay, we want to become agile. What does that mean to us? What do we all need to do together to reach that? So that's more logical.
And I believe that's require a lot of the volunteering work, right?
Absolutely.
So any recipe how to start this volunteering collection, you know, how to engage people to be inside this?
Make it attractive. So be open, be transparent.
Gamification, right? It's kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be transparent is the first step. I've participated in transitions where some managers were really afraid of giving all the information to the people, and later on it paid back negatively. So they had to calm down all the rumors, all the myths which were going on in the organization. This is once again wasting time and energy, right? If you're transparent from the very first time on, and if you have an open door policy for that everybody can join, for example, this transition whenever they want to, or collect all the information they want to, that makes much more sense, and it's much better in my personal experience than just, you know, selecting bits and pieces for the information. And then you can also make it attractive out of that. You can explain what are benefits. And you can get rid of all these fears which are blocking people from going from A to B.
You know, with these points of how to start less, the most challenging for me personally is to define the product. Because that's kind of the example. You came to the telecom company, say, okay guys, what is your product? They will answer, our product is the tariff plan. Or our product is the mobile conversation. So you call in or send in the SMS, that's our product. But guys, come on, we stop calling each other on the cell phone, we start texting in Viber, and we are not paying for you for the SMS anymore. So how it can even be your product right now, right? So do you have any like maybe how to make this mind breaking? Because for me, it's usually like to crack the mind of the people to start thinking in absolutely another way.
Yeah, the most simple answer I like to give to such a question is ask the end customer. They will tell you what your product is. They will tell you what they expect to buy from you, where they want to reach in the pocket and give you money for that. And that's exactly the best answer usually, right? Some companies had the strategy to create products without knowing if everybody is interested in that. They have separate innovations departments, creativity processes, and so on. They create great stuff, but nobody outside of their buildings want to really have that. So for me, it's always the identification with a product means our end customers need to see this product as our product. I mean, there's large brands, large names where they buy they sell an object, but with the object they sell a lot of emotions or a lifestyle or something like that. The combination of all of that should be the product, should be seen as the product in my personal opinion.
Any examples of a product you set with the clients?
For an insurance company, it was really interesting because they always said our systems are our product, right? This is like the typical way of
booking system,
product-oriented, product-centric thinking, right? We want to do more customer-centric thinking. So we went away from the systems towards, okay, our departments need what do they need actually to service the end customers? So is it really a system or is it some kind of information that's flowing through systems? So they changed their way of thinking about the product. Now it's not the systems themselves, it's the service we provide with the systems. And that's also helping them to simplify the systems nowadays.
What was the most challenging for you to start the LeSS?
Oh, I had an experience last year which was not very nice for myself because it was supposed to be a LeSS transition. It didn't turn out to become one. It was not supported really. It was more like one guy said, a program manager, we want to do less. They wanted more autonomy for their programs, etc. But none or only one or two of the other managers were really buying into that and the rest didn't. They just said, sure, go for it. If we are faster, if we have higher quality, if we're more flexible, do it. We don't care. So there was no support. Whatever you do. And then one after the other, people got sick. So like the one who hired me for that. So the product owner, it was firefighting more or less, not transitioning. Then the chief Scrum Master got sick. So it was firefighting there, etc., etc. So it was doomed more or less, actually. It didn't become a LeSS transition. The program was pretty much a success as far as I know, but transitioning, it was too early for them.
Too early for them, okay. When you say too early, is there any kind of checklist you can give it? Like, if these 5 elements is in your organization right now, you shouldn't start LeSS.
I have a checklist, like I said previously, with 10 bullet points, which are prerequisites for me, like executive commitment, know where you go, know your goal, know your starting point, etc. So I have this list, which I always do before I start something. If 1 or 2 are not checked off already, we can work on that. If 8 out of 10 are not checked off, forget it. It's too early. It's too early.
Sometimes when we are doing even Scrum, there is kind of a Scrum theater. I have this very good metaphor how the Scrum theater looks like. It's when you have all of the Scrum meetings and the product owners came to the team and there is some kind of prioritization, backlog, but actually they do it just because someone told them to do it, right? So I'm trying to understand how to identify that company is actually playing the theater in the transformation, not actually doing the transformation. Because they actually can do whatever you suggest them to do or whatever you coach them to do. Right? But they can just play in their roles because of the Larman law, they are still supporting. So you said, okay, now you are not the project manager, you are the Scrum Master or product owner. doesn't mean you became a product owner, right?
I mean, there are many signals that you can observe. One is, of course, that teams are not teams. I mean, they are going to a sprint planning, they are pulling items from the product backlog, but assigning one item per person, for example, it's a strong indicator that they are not becoming a team or so. This has nothing to do with Scrum then. I mean, Scrum is not talking about so much about the real team. This is more and less that we're saying a team has to become a team, not a work group working on the same goal, but a team, like in sports. So everybody stands in for everybody else, right? And we can substitute each other's and so on. That's really what we want to achieve. So this is one of the signals. Other signals is really if people are talking about doing Agile. This is really what kind of language they are using, what kind of words they are using, because doing Agile makes absolutely no sense to me. Agile is a philosophy, Agile is a mindset, a value system. So we can be Agile. Are we already Agile? The next question I very often ask is, do you know what the Agile principles are? Do you know what the Agile manifesto is? We are Agile, but do you know what it means? And rather rarely I get an answer, yes, sure, we know all of them.
There is always a question of what is first, egg or a chicken, right? So that's the question of what's going to be first, culture or you need to build the environment that will bring this culture. Or you need to build a culture, then you build the environment. Because Einstein also told that the problems of the current people mindset, caused by the current people mindset, could not be fixed on this level of the mindset. So you need to get better to understand that you cannot work like this, or you need to make a next step. So in this particular case, that means that you need to change your culture, become agile to make the change, right?
Einstein also said the purest version of craziness is if you change nothing, expect different results. So, I mean, if you really want to be agile, you need to change something. If you're going from a non-agile, a non-adaptive environment to something which is more adaptive in the end. And of course that, like I said, this requests a lot of energy, a lot of input, and people need to be ready for that, definitely.
I'm as a less practitioner, I'm usually came to the company and see the next challenge, right? So let's say we already know what is our goal, what is the values inside, and we educate everyone we need. So everyone in the company is educated, right? So we even define the best product we can ever define, right? So that's the mind-blowing product. And then we start collecting these teams. And that the problem started because the organizations, most of the big organizations, they're pretty functional, pretty fragmentized, and is very, very focused for one person and his skills, right? So there is the very functional specification on each person. So I'm only signing the paper. I did nothing else. So wherever you give me to sign the paper, I will sign it and move the work. So and then in LeSS, we have the next attributes, right? So when we say, okay, we have a product owner with the backlog, and this is the one product owner, multiple ones, right? One backlog, multiple feature teams, and we say that any of this team can do any of this backlog element, end to end, right? And then they are saying, okay, guys, but this means that inside these teams we need to collect the whole organization, right?
Yeah, and that sounds very overwhelming, and that myth of everybody can do everything, it's a myth. Yeah,
of course.
Of course, we want feature teams, we want to end-to-end features, but if we have such complex structures like our information is flowing through, let's say, 50 components, 50 different systems or something like that, to cover within one team 50 different systems is almost impossible from a cognitive capacity, right? That means we need to come up with a structure which is still supporting end-to-end procedures and end-to-end features, but gives the people a little bit more freedom that they still can specialize in something, But not just specialization is important, you also need generalization. That means create overlaps between the teams, that this end-to-end can, at least with a cooperation of multiple teams, work in the end.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah, Buzzwater said one interesting sentence. In LeSS, we want to maximize the dependencies between teams. Because we're working on product.
Yes, we don't have dependencies in LeSS, right? We have a common work that needs to be done by the multiple teams, right?
Exactly.
So, and I believe that that's actually where the feature teams will start emerging, right?
Yeah,
So they will start emerging. You know, like organizations, when they start doing agile and multiple teams, they start scaling. They clearly say this word: we will scale the agile in organization. So, like the metaphor that came in my mind, that they will start like pushing the books inside your head and scale your head with everything, right?
Yeah.
So the big organizations, they did scaling for the years, right? That's why they came big.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So that's a nature for them to scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
But unless we don't want to scale, right?
We want, Greg Larman and Buzzword, they always say it's a descaling framework. So they play around with the words a little bit. What is scaling agile? I mean, scaling agile to me makes absolutely no sense. How can you scale a mindset? We have the mindset or we don't have it. It's more or less black and white almost, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to scale the mindset. What I really can do is create a structure that supports the mindset, and that's these kind of structures and processes, these kind of methodologies, that's what I can scale or descale, make it more simpler or make it more complex, right? So for me, scaling agile is the wrong approach. If we say, how can we be agile in a large scale environment? That's more the questions to me. And then, of course, we can say we use LeSS to build a different kind of structure, different kind of cooperation and communication style within the company.
You know, I believe in this case we need a big engagement of the top managers, and they have to start changing their ideas in the minds, right?
Absolutely.
So, what is your most focus on the beginning of the transformation? Because, you know, unless we have this beautiful picture, engagement of the Scrum Master in a time when the Scrum Master in the beginning is very engaged with the product owner and team, and it's going down, and his engagement with the organization and DevOps tools is going up, right? So what is your most of the engagement while you're transforming the organization? How it's changed?
At the beginning, I try to focus really mostly on the product itself and product owners, because there's so much dependencies to the product owners. If we want to build a feature team, we first need to understand what is our product and what kind of skills do we need within a team to be cross-functional and cross-component oriented. So if we don't know that up front, we go probably in the right, we could go in the wrong direction. So first, product with the product owners, and also help the product owners to identify what value means for their organization. Not just the product itself, of course, that's important. What's the vision with the product, but also what's the value behind that? How do you sort your product backlog? What are the factors?
What are the factors, right? You know, when we are going through the LeSS adoption, there is the pretty interesting word in the next steps, right? You have a team. You can start, you define the definition of done, and then the very interesting point started. So keep managers away. It clearly says, keep managers away.
Keep project managers
project managers away from this. But do we only focus on the project managers? Because in the big organization, there are thousands of managers who previously interact with these people, right? So they have line managers, they have a top managers, they have a team kind of managers, right?
Once again, not all project managers are bad people.
Of course.
So, and project management is still something that we need, because we still work with projects. but they become more containers for budget and time frames. So we reduce it pretty much to that. We want to focus on a product development environment, which is more important because the product continues after the project has ended, probably. So we need to do maintenance, etc., and even upgrade it, extend it, etc. And keeping people away from a team only makes sense if they cause some interruptions or disturbance, right? Whether these people are project managers or other kind of stakeholders or managers or even other teams, it doesn't matter. We just need to create a culture and an environment where a feature team can really focus on what they need to deliver and on the goals.
You know, the biggest fear I ever saw in the organization while the transformation is the fear of the managers, not only the project managers, but the managers overall. What we're going to do in the organization that is actually build it on the cross-functional, self-organized, self-managed, and self-governed teams, right? So, what you suggest to do for the managers in agile organization?
Yeah, I mean, LeSS doesn't say we don't need managers. It says less managers are optional. If we need them, they should create some kind of value for the organization. So just the role changes. Probably we need not that many managers anymore because we in very traditional oriented and command and control style oriented enterprises, organizations, there are so many managers who are helping to coordinate between teams and between people and stuff like that. So probably that's not so much needed anymore. But what we still need is somebody who helps to build this coordination-friendly environment, right? To create a great workspace, to help people to grow. So it's coming closer together with the role of a Scrum Master, actually, this kind of management. But Scrum Masters don't have the authority that a manager has. Managers can make decisions on restructuring, on reorganization, on budgets, etc. So that still keep staying with the line management. And other managers who became managers and probably didn't want to become some, they can choose whatever they want to. I mean, there are 3 roles. They can become product owners, they can become Scrum Masters, they can go back to teams. There's enough work that needs to be done. Yeah. So we don't need to lose them. Maybe they lose some kind of authority, but they gain some other kind of authority probably, or autonomy. Yeah. These can be really great benefits, right?
Yeah. Have you ever saw the managers who stop to be the managers, start to be the players inside the Scrum functional teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen people going back to hands-on work because they really loved to do some technical stuff.
I actually saw the managers who told, finally, I can work.
Yeah.
I've lived all of this stuff behind of my manager's stuff. And I don't need to think about all of this shit. Yeah. So now I can work with the people and do some
Absolutely.
Job. That was actually the really amazing insight for me. That's I saw this the first time when the people saying something like this. So they engage to be empowered, right? So without power.
Over the last 25 years, I've seen many managers being promoted just because they were the best in their job, and not the best managers, the best coders or testers or something like that, right? And it seemed like the status symbol seemed like it's really a promotion, but in fact they had to deal with so many other things like leadership, etc., where they had absolutely no educational background to it, right? So they were super experts in technology, but really bad in leadership and management, right? And that doesn't make really sense to me. If somebody wants to become a manager, they should also get the education for that. It's the same as with any other kind of career.
Let's, by the way, speak about a bit of education, right? Because we start less with the education and we educate people in less, right? In Scrum, in roles, in the model of the behavior, right? But I don't personally think that's enough.
No, it's not.
What is your suggestion to also have in this education list?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you need to understand the framework itself, because if you need to play a new game, you need to understand the rules of the game. Otherwise, you can't play it. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense. But other than that, for specific roles like a Scrum Master, I mean, I always say the minimal education you need to have as a Scrum Master is coaching. You need to understand what coaching really means, not just going to people and talking to them or something like that. That's not coaching, right? This is really something you need to learn. Product owners should be aware of what product management means, right? What is a product life cycle? How does it behave on the market, etc.? What's a chasm, etc., etc.? So all these kind of things that should people really understand in their roles. Yeah.
If you are one of the employee of the organization, what is the role do you prefer to have in this organization? Just imagine you are just a regular employee. Who you would like to be in the organization?
You know, I got a similar question today, and my answer was, it depends on the time, you know. It really changes. There are times when I really prefer to be a product owner. There were times when I really like to work more with the people from a Scrum Master perspective. And sometimes I really like to be in a team and deliver something directly. So, but that changes, you know. If I've done something for 4 years, maybe I want to try something else.
Else. And by the way, this is the very important thing. So right now the world is changing so much fast, right? And the education that we had in the school and in the university, it's most of the time doesn't make any sense, right? So you educate something, but then you have to re-educate continuously. So you cannot be one job person anymore for the whole life. So.
You can stay where you are. I mean, yes, that's definitely true. I mean, I still think education, what we learn in school, still makes sense.
That still makes sense because that's the basement.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And even the educational systems change a lot. You know, they're going way away from 45 minutes this topic, 45 minutes that topic, etc. They're going towards more like, we have a goal, you need to work that out. You have, let's say, 2 weeks, and then come back and do the presentation of that. At least my kids learn in such a school.
We are far away from this in Ukraine.
Okay.
We are usually 5 years behind the Europe. So that's really, so we are doing here what the Europe did 5 years ago.
I mean, the school I mentioned, my daughters go to, it's also an exception in Austria, but even these educational systems and the thinkers for them, they start to rethink the approaches, right? And that's really good to see, actually, so that people can that kids learn to interact more and mentor others. That's what I really like. It's not just learning for myself, but what can I do with my knowledge? Yeah? How can I apply it?
You know, in SAFE, there is a statement, I remember it from education, I didn't check it once again, but I remember something like this. Then to do SAFE, you have to be 100% great in Scrum. So they're saying you have to know how to make Scrum before you start making SAFE. Is there any prerequisites in this in LeSS? So you should be a fantastic Scrum team before you go LeSS and start scaling everything.
Okay. Yes, there is one principle which says LeSS is Scrum. Yeah. So without knowing what Scrum is, LeSS won't ever work, because you need to understand first at a more simple way of doing it. What is Scrum? How does it work? Why does it work? Then you can start thinking in larger scales. Yeah.
So am I right? You do not suggest to start with, in an organization never used Scrum before, to start creating the cross-functional teams and organizing them in LeSS. So you suggest to start with the single teams, play Scrum there, understand how it works, and then...
Yeah, I mean, what can be done and what I've seen working is that we start with, let's say, 2 to 4 teams, because then we see also the dynamics of the interactions and interdependencies between the teams. If you start with only one team, it's good for learning that this one team understands Scrum and they can become a leading team. I've seen that working too. But on the other hand, you really miss all these interdependencies, interactions between teams then. So from my point of view, from my personal experience, it's really good if you have at least 2 teams and see and learn from there together.
You know, in LeSS, we have this one product owner for multiple teams, right? So one product owner may have up to 9, right, teams. Have you ever seen 9 teams with one product owner?
It's up to 8. So basic LeSS is 2 to 8, and then we say requirements areas have 4 to 8 teams. So it's this magic number is 8 at the moment, but it's just empiricism. So it's an empirical data we have there. If you have people who really can work with more than 8 teams, it's even better, because a requirements area is a local optimization. It's a compromise in LeSS, not a suggested one. If one person can work with 20 teams, why not? I mean, it should work. Personally, I can't remember a case where there were more than 8 teams per product owner. I mean, not talking about the overall product owner, but directly related.
But for the area.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because when I'm speaking about LeSS, that was make the people confused the most. Because in Scrum, we have Scrum team and product owner. So the people start thinking that it's like obvious. You have 2 Scrum teams, you have 2 product owners, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, wherever it is. But we know that it leads to the local optimization inside one team, right? So if you can collect all of the backlogs to the one single backlog, there might be that all of the job that did it by one team is the most important from the other jobs, right?
Yeah. And this is one of the main differences to other scaling frameworks, also the newer ones. LeSS is said to be multi-team Scrum, not multiple Scrum teams. Yeah, that's the biggest difference actually to other scaling frameworks. We really want to have one product owner making the decisions, doing the ordering of the backlog and stuff like that. Because team product owners, if we read the Scrum guide carefully, and that might deviate a little bit of the ideas of Jeff Sutherland, but if we read the Scrum guide carefully, it doesn't say there is a team product owner. What would be a team product owner? What does a team product owner own? What kind of product? It can be a team leader or something like that makes decisions for the team, but it's not a product owner per se anymore. I think Ken Schwaber, when he came up, or Sutherland and Schwaber, when they came up with the idea of a product owner, it's really more somebody who is in a management, in a business function that makes decisions about the product and sees that the value can be optimized, doing an optimization of value, right? But that means I really need to own the product.
Yep.
Yeah.
The last question for today. What was your the most right and the most wrong decision you ever made during LeSS transformation?
Oh, wow. This is an interesting question. The most right and the most wrong decision. Yes. I mean, I think the biggest failure or biggest mistake I have made was when we did a LeSS transition and I agreed that we don't have everything transparent. So I didn't push for that. I should really push for that as a coach, I guess. And I didn't do that. Right decisions, there are many.
This is LeSS transition. Okay, thank you very much for this conversation. It was great. I believe we answered most of the really critical and great questions that people have in their mind. You know, you started with the pretty cool example when the people start asking for you how to do this less not transparent, right? So how can you make less when you are outsourcer with the native company, right? I actually have even worse examples. That's gonna be the last question. So okay. I'm just trying, you know, it just came into my mind. So what if, can you make less in the situation when there is the outsourcer that doesn't create anything transparent for your company, but you have everything transparent inside. So you have someone outside who's making, for example, the mobile application for you. Yeah. And you're making all of the rest inside your organization, pretty straightforward, but you cannot speak directly to the developers sitting out there. You are speaking to the product owner, business analyst on that side, and given the documentation, so they will implement it. Is it possible somehow in this situation?
I mean, it's not real LeSS what you can do then, but you can take a lot of these principles and practices from LeSS and optimize your working style, your working behavior. Like you get work from somewhere. That means you have a list of work or work packages or whatever it is. And you can still then run your sprints together in your organization and deliver as soon as possible, aim for the most beneficial feedback you can get, etc. This all you can do, right? It's definitely not the basic idea that you interact with the product owner then a lot and stuff like that. That's maybe missing. But still from the others, even if it's maybe a little more just the mechanics, could also create some benefits for such an outsourcing partner.
Okay, thank you very much. That was great pleasure for me to speak with you. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Друзья, спасибо всем за просмотр. Задавайте свои вопросы в комментариях, пишите, кого вы хотите увидеть в следующих выпусках. Подписывайтесь на нашу страницу, у нас еще огромное количество всего нового и полезного для вас.